Hi, my name is Alex Gilmet. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This webinar is about how to get control of your workers' comp costs. So we're also going to send this out to some individuals that we know they're having some issues with their workers' comp. But if you're here today, thank you for being here. Hopefully you find value in this. So a little background on us. We are a California-based property and casualty insurance broker. We're headquartered in Oakland, California. We do work up and down the state. And nothing that we're going to give today, we intend to be legal advice. So don't do that. We're not attorneys. But this is our advice and our suggestions regarding how to improve your workers' comp perspective. So who is this intended for? It's for business owners and leaders, especially those here in California. Most of the time, we're dealing with blue-collar businesses. Why? It's because blue-collar businesses typically have more expensive workers' comp. So whether you're talking about, from real far the end of the extreme, tree trimming and roofing, really expensive. You might have contractors, you have trucking, you've got you may have logistics, warehousing, restaurants, those sorts of things, all blue collar, using tools, wearing an apron, using equipment. So we deal with them because the workers' comp is more expensive. And when they do have a workers' comp problem, it becomes urgent because it really cuts into their margins. So if you're listening to this, or if you're here, or if I sent this to you, you most likely have a workers' comp problem. And what I mean by that is your workers' comp is very expensive. And there's a thing called an experience modifier. We call it an XMO. What this is basically a gauge that the workers' comp system uses to assess you and your performance from a workers' comp perspective. Right. So let's suppose, as an example, we're talking about an industry that's got a $10 rate. That's just the rate for your workers' comp code for what your staff is doing the majority of the time. So let's suppose $10 is that number. So it's $10 for every $100 of payroll. Well, if you have a 1.0 mod, which means your average, just right there in the middle, you're going to pay $10 for every $100 of payroll. If you have a credit mod, say a 0.7, well, now you're going to pay $7 for every $100 of payroll. That's great. But if you're on the other end of that spectrum and say you got a 1.5 mod, well, now you're paying $15 for every $100 of payroll. And we see some that you could have a 3.0, a 3.5 mod. So now you're paying $30 for every $100 of payroll. That hurts, especially when you're competing with people that are paying $10 or $7. So we want to get you on the other end of that spectrum as soon as possible. So most likely, if your mod is that high, is up, you also have an employee litigation problem, meaning that the workers' comp claim is being litigated. That injured worker went out and got an attorney to represent them. And we see that every time an attorney is involved, a plaintiff attorney is involved, the claim goes on much, much longer. And the meter keeps on running. It's more and more and more expensive. And we often see that most likely if you've got a workers' comp litigation problem, you also have a litigation problem with your employees in other areas. It could be wage and hour violations, unlawful termination, discrimination, those sorts of things. So we're going to address some of those. By the way, you have on the screen here. Sometimes they turn into PAGA cases, the Private Attorney General Act, and that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. It's a business killer. Settlements in PAGA cases are at least six figures most of the time. Can be very, very expensive. And often standard insurance policies won't provide a whole lot of support if you have a PAGA issue, especially wage and hour. Okay. So let's move on. So first suggestion is look at your policy, your workers' comp policy, and see if it's a good fit for you. Like you don't know that unless you go out and shop that. What I mean by shopping a new policy is, get a new policy, is find one that's a good fit for you. Find one that works for you. So let's suppose when you started your business, you had to go to State Fund, or you took whoever would take you because you're a new risk. Well, that's not the case anymore. And you may be with a carrier that doesn't really particularly like your type of work. You could be last mile delivery. You could be long haul trucking. Maybe you're doing restaurants, or you've got, I don't know, you're doing roofing or something else. Well, there may be carriers that actually prefer that sort of work and they know your industry. So you should consider getting a new policy. Now, do you have to wait till the end of your policy period? Not necessarily. Okay, keep in mind, if you were to end your existing policy early, there's a short rate penalty. They're going to charge you for some of that unearned premium, but it still may be worth it. It's worth looking to see, well, what am I going to save versus what it's going to cost me in a penalty? The other thing to consider is, what is it going to do to my claims? Because the way it normally works is there's a 3-year period that a claim is used to evaluate or assess your experience modifier. I want to be careful that you don't mess up that window, because claims that could have fallen off may stay on for an additional year because we moved your workers' comp termination date, right? So we got to be careful. And speaking of getting a new policy, we should always consider a PEO, professional employer organization, and an ECO, an employer carve-out organization. Why? It's because they have different standards that they use to evaluate risk, which means sometimes they can offer substantial savings when it comes to your workers' comp, because they're going to look at your risk differently, because they also have services, compliance, safety, HR. They're going to help you get better at your safety. Like that's the part of what they're using to assess, right? So again, those are good ones to consider also. All right, moving on. We should shop the workers' comp policy every year. Now, we're brokers, so I mean this with all love and respect to my fellow brokers out there. We can be lazy. Brokers can be lazy. And it takes some effort to shop your policy every year. And sometimes it's a bit of a pain. Now, it's worthwhile to do because you never know. You might have a new carrier that moves into the marketplace who likes your type of work, like your industry, they like your geography, and they're willing to offer better rates. Sometimes it's easier for the broker to just say, hey, I shopped you last year. This is the best rate. We'll continue with this carrier for the next couple of years. The reality also is that sometimes a broker will want to keep you with an existing carrier at the rate that they have and the commission level that they're making. Now, they may be able to find you something better, but it's actually in the broker's best interest because they're making more money on that. And again, no offense to any brokers, but that's part of the evaluation for a lot of brokers, depending upon what policies they're offering. It takes effort to shop it every year, but it's worth doing 2 or 3 months before your policy expires. Put it out to market and let's see what you can get. Another strategy to use is add a deductible, a per claim deductible. What I'm saying here is that typically on a workers' comp policy, there's no deductible. $1 throughout the insurance carriers picking up the cost. It ends up coming back onto you in terms of your experience modifier, cost you later on. But from $1, it's the carrier picking up the cost. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are carriers, standard market carriers, and PEOs and ECOs that will say, let's negotiate. So might be worthwhile to put a $250 or $500 or even $1,000 deductible on each claim that you as the business owner is going to pick up, because it changes how the carrier evaluates you as a risk. So it may be worth it. Now, we have to look at what sort of claims you have and what are the costs, but it could be something that you can negotiate rates that are really in your favor. For the carrier standpoint also, it changes how they're looking at you, because they're saying, hey, this person's willing to take more risk. They got more skin in the game, right? So it's a worthwhile thing to look at. Okay, moving on. So here we go. Safety items. This is a big one. keep this in mind. We're still dealing with human to humans. Artificial intelligence hasn't taken over everything yet. So we're still dealing with human to humans. And we have to realize that there's a bit of storytelling here. Now, when I say storytelling, I'm saying as a broker, I go out and meet with someone, I get their information, I see the loss history, the type of work they do, all these good things. And I'm putting together a package that I'm going to take out to different carriers and PEOs and ECOs to say, what can you guys do for us? And I'm trying to put your business in the best light possible. Now, good storytelling makes a big difference. It also helps to have good content in which to tell. Now, if you don't already have the content, which we'll talk about, we can help you put that together, or you could do this, and we have templates and forms that we can give you to help you in the process. So I'm talking about safety items, the audit, doing a safety audit, having safety procedures that are in writing. You've document what sort of equipment you use and the safety procedures regarding the equipment and the facilities. And you have a person in charge of safety. And most time it's good to have that person, who's that face person, someone that the team respects, right? Sometimes it's best to have one of them who believes in safety to be the lead. Others help that person, but that person is the lead because the rest of the team and the staff respects them. You have a safety manual, right? You put safety in your employee handbooks. Here's where it gets really good. When we can show that you have safety in your job description, and it's part of the review you have with your employees, that really tells the carrier that safety matters to you. And again, part of the storytelling is being able to show the actual documents, show the pictures and the video of what you're doing regarding safety. Okay, this one is also important in terms of showing carriers, and also for your own sake, how you're minimizing the impact of claims. Our return to work program. So here's what we're talking about. One of your guys gets hurt, maybe it's a shoulder injury. They're out, they got to go to the clinic or a physician, they get some advice, they're going through the process. Well, once they get released to light duty, that physician says, hey, you can now lift up to 15 pounds and you can work 4 hours a day. And they kind of go through that process. As soon as that happens, you want to get to a point where you get that employee back to work. Obviously, modify what they're doing to meet those physicians' requirements, but you want to get them out of their home, away from watching the TV and the ads for personal injury attorneys. Now, you may say, I don't have anything for them to do at my facility. Well, let's get creative and think of some things they could do. Or if you say, I don't want them here. Okay, I get it. Well, we can work with other nonprofits, different organizations who do want those kind of workers. And they'll say, hey, we've got something that they could do that meets those requirements. Okay. So it's a worthwhile thing to do, and we can help you if you need it, setting that up. A wellness program. This is also very important. So again, what we're trying to do is not only show your team, but show the carrier that you care about the health of your staff. So this is their overall wellness, and it doesn't have to be some over the top, wellness program that's got everything under the sun. No, this could be just simply saying we're going to promote healthy behavior with our staff. As simple as being subsidized gym memberships or recognize people who are doing healthy things. You bring in healthy meals, that sort of thing. And you could partner with organizations who will help you with mental health services or nutritional guidelines and stop smoking and other sorts of things that help your staff be healthy. And it, again, looks good to your team because you care. It also looks great to the carrier because they're going to look and say, obviously, this person's willing to invest in their staff. This one is important also. Workplace violence prevention. SB 553 went into law about a year ago, and it became mandatory. I think it was back in July of last year. So in this case, for the vast majority of California employers, you're supposed to have a workplace violence prevention program in place. Documentation that you share with your employees, the first round of training. Here's some specific items. And it's basically saying we're going to try to do what we can to avoid violence in the workplace. How do we identify it? How do we avoid it? How do we report it? What do we deal with in those situations? And, what do we do if something bad were to happen? Like, what's our evacuation plan? How do we go about it? So it's, even if you're not required to do it, it's a good thing to do because it shows your employees that you care. It also shows the carriers. And again, not just workers' comp. This could be your general liability, like just about every line of insurance you have. They want to see that you care about how you're operating your business. It matters in terms of how they look at you as a risk. So if you need help with that, we can definitely give you the forms, give you the information, and we can help you with the training. This one is huge. Alternative dispute resolution, ADR. So this helps in workers' comp for sure, but in other areas also where you just have disputes with your employees. What you want to do is take that dispute out of the hands of going to plaintiff attorneys and into the California court system. We don't want that because it gets very, very, very expensive. So what you want to do is bake in another means on how you're going to resolve employee disputes, including workers' comp. So in that case, what you do is you work with a good California legal resource who knows California labor law very well. And you bake into your program that, hey, if we have a dispute between the employer and the employee, here's how we're going to resolve. We got an ombudsman that we're going to use. We've got mediation. Maybe we finally go to arbitration, and it keeps it out of the court system. Literally, you'll see sometimes that, if you have an employee that's disgruntled, they may go contact an attorney. And the attorney says, well, let me see your documentation. Let me see your employment agreement. And when they see that there's an ADR baked into that employment agreement, they're less likely to take on that case because they can't have the meter running. It's not going to be as lucrative for them, right? So it really makes sense. Now, we had mentioned the ECOs before, that employer carve-out. Baked into the program with the ECOs is this alternative dispute resolution. It's a huge advantage. It's huge. It's almost like you have the advantages of being a union entity without actually being the union. So you've got all those levers that help both the employer and the employee. It's good for both sides. The only group it's not good for is those plaintiff attorneys. It's not good for them. But we take out those frictional costs and everyone saves money. It's a good thing. Okay. So having said all that, our offer is that we can provide you with a free workers' comp evaluation. So we'll take a look at your situation, your environment, where you are now. We just need to get some information on your claims. We'll ask about your safety procedures, your XMOD. We'll come back with a report that says, hey, here's where you are. Here's the things that you could do. And here's the way we would recommend you look at this in terms of a sequence. We'll also give you recommendations on some carriers that you might want to look at, both standard market, PEO, and ECO, that could offer substantial savings. Sometimes those savings are immediate, meaning you were paying $15 today, you could be at $8 tomorrow. Well, within a couple of weeks, let's put it that way. So if you want to take advantage of this, please let us know. Here's our contact information. Again, we can do this evaluation. It doesn't take very long. And listen, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, especially if you're having workers' comp issues or employee litigation issues, like you're getting sued by your employees. Let's look at it and see if we have some other options. Okay, I looked earlier and I didn't see any questions come in, but I had a few that were emailed to me earlier. And okay, let me go through these real quick. First one, why is workers' comp so expensive in California? And as I had mentioned, we have a very liberal workers' comp system in California. The Workers' Comp Appeals Board very much weighs on the side of the employee. And that just means sometimes that claims that are somewhat bogus are not rejected. They stay. and they run and they run and they run and they run, and the meter's running, and a claim that should have been handled in 30 days or 60 days is open for 2 years. And they're going to the clinic, and the meter keeps running, 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 running. Cost the carrier and ultimately cost you as the business owner. So how much can I save on workers' comp? Most of the time, when we get involved with clients, it's at least 20%. I mean, just by putting some good things in place, doing some good storytelling, and knowing where to go look for the best workers' comp rates, it's 20%. We've had some occasions where I'll cut your workers' comp expenses in half. I mean, sometimes we're going to use the PEO or the ECO, but I'll cut your workers' comp in half. Like that's the way it works. You find a better solution. Next question is, what if I don't have the safety measures in place? Again, we talked about that. If you don't have them in place, we can give you the forms and the documents and kind of the process so you can start to put these things in place. It's not that difficult. It's really not. Let's see here. The next one. What if I don't know my XMOD or even my workers' comp, like X date? That's okay. That's fine. I mean, we expect you to. You're good at your business and doing whatever it is that you do. I don't expect you to be good at this insurance thing. If you want to know your XMOD, just let us know. Send us a message. Give us a call. We could easily pull it up, including what has your XMOD been over the years? What's the trend? And then we could even look at your claims and say, what do we anticipate your XMOD is going to be next year? And as far as the X date, if you send us your policy, we can kind of comb through it and see if we'll certainly find the date. And otherwise look to see, is there anything else baked into this agreement that is either good or not so good? We bring it to your attention. Okay, where should I start? So literally, we think you start with an assessment. Where are we now? And literally look to see, what can we do next? What are our options? We would love to help you with that. Like, we're not going to charge you for this. It's our way of getting to know you, getting to provide some advice on this. And we'll look at some basic questions, your answers to those, and look at your claims. We'll ask you about your safety. And if you say, I don't have it, we'll say, cool, okay, you don't have it. Well, let's correct that. So it's a pretty simple process. And good question. How does Vigilant Defense Insurance make money? Okay. So if I'm not going to charge you for these services, where am I making my money? And that's like, we make our money from the commission that the carriers are paying. Carriers, PEO, ECO, they pay a commission. So somebody's going to make the money. I mean, it's just a matter of figuring out, who do you trust to help you along this process? And hopefully you will ultimately trust us, because we're there for you and try to find the lowest rates. And sometimes it actually hurts. Let's be totally frank, because I'll be able to find a guy that I've had with me and say, hey, I found a carrier that'll take you from a $10 rate to a $7. And that hurts our commission. It does. I mean, but the reality is better for the client. And you always weigh on the side of what's best for the client. What is best? In addition, let's be totally frank, we also provide other lines of insurance. So we'll see often that workers' comp was our lead in, but our clients will reach out and say, hey, can you provide us with the general liability, the business owner's policy, or an umbrella policy, or auto coverage for our fleet, or cyber coverage, or even sometimes accounts receivable insurance, because they've got a big client, big project. They're worried maybe the client's not going to pay. Well, there's insurance for that. So again, sometimes what we'll have is that clients will reach out and say, hey, can you help us with other lines of insurance? So again, Alex Gilmet, Vigilant Defense Insurance Services, thank you for attending the webinar today. And there'll be others coming out, but if you need any help, certainly for workers' comp, but other types of commercial insurance, please reach out. We would love to help. Again, thanks for attending today, and I appreciate your time.